Welcome to podcast number 6. Hi, I'm Gil Kennedy, President and CEO of Har-Co Credit Union. Today's podcast is about education and the world of education and how it has changed, particularly in light of COVID-19 in the school systems. Today, we have a podcast featuring Michael Ionescu. Michael is from Eye to Eye Education, and he will talk about how tutoring can support the differing educational models that needed to be instituted with COVID-19.
Today I'm with Mike Ionescu of Eye to Eye Consulting, Eye to Eye Tutoring.
Eye to Eye Education.
Very good. And we're going to talk about education, and we're going to also talk about some of the things that have come up during these unique times related to it. Michael, tell us a little bit about Eye to Eye. What's your history? How did you get into this business?
Sure. Started over 10 years ago doing one-to-one tutoring. We really saw a need for tutoring kids. From my perspective, the general tutoring out there has been very time intensive. So a student, in order to get effective tutoring, would have to sign up for 50 hours minimum at tutoring location, 2 hours, 4 hours a week. And a lot of the students that I started working with had no time for that. They needed quick, effective tutoring in a time efficient manner, and that's how we started. So when I first started tutoring, our SAT program, we were able to see kids once a week for about an hour and a half and achieve similar results to kids who were going to tutoring programs who did 4 to 6 hours a week, and my students just didn't have time for that. And so we were able to develop a platform that taught kids efficiently, quickly, and for a more affordable price than the 6 hours a week.
Gotcha. So let's talk about these unique times. This whole COVID situation has created different situations for all parts of life, but education's been a major part of it. What have you found have been some of the outcomes? What are the situations that are unique to this pandemic?
Well, for us, we've had to completely readjust how we teach kids. For our initial goal in tutoring was one-to-one teaching in a person's home or at a location of the student's preference, just because we like to make sure the student was comfortable. Coincidentally, we were developing a remote teaching platform that just so happened we launched around the same time that the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, in which we work with students on whatever work they might have, whether it be homework, SAT prep, ACT prep, on a shared account platform in which we work together one-to-one in real time on whatever document they might be working on. So, and almost all my business, 90% of it now, has transitioned to that because everyone's been quarantined. So for me, it's transitioned greatly. In looking at the space as a whole, I've seen a lot of differences. Obviously a lot of school systems have transitioned to Zoom meetings or remote learning platforms to help their kids learn. One of the biggest issues I've seen with that, though, is it's very difficult to take students who have for years and years and years been used to classroom learning, whether it be in person, where they can talk to the teacher directly, have follow-up questions, show them work, turn in homework, interact with their peers about work they might have questions on, to transition to a remote learning platform where you're basically listening to a teacher. 30 kids from a class are listening to a teacher potentially give a lecture on a new lesson. It's very difficult to transition to that and for children to be able to learn that effectively and efficiently. And that's, from my perspective, it's a tremendous hurdle, especially in some of the more intensive classes like mathematics, for example. We've had kids who have lost a whole half a year of learning a math subject, Algebra 2, for instance. It's very difficult for a student to learn a whole half a year of Algebra 2 on their own and do follow-up work with that. One of the other hurdles has been that there really hasn't been traditional homework and traditional testing in that sense. So for students to really have their knowledge tested it hasn't quite been as robust as it would be in an in-person setting.
Gotcha. So we're kind of in a suboptimal situation with this whole pandemic thing, and as we're sitting here as the summer has begun, and parents are probably sitting out there saying, "Well, wow, I don't want to go into the next school year behind, and want to do the best I can do for my kids." What can they do for their students right now?
Well, it's actually been a huge worry for a lot of parents I've interacted with, where they feel like, as they're going into, maybe if they're transitioning from grade school to high school, or if they're getting ready for college, they've missed out potentially a whole half a year of math that could be very important for them. And, there aren't necessarily, with all the questions still looming, are we in quarantine? When is it going to be lifted? How can kids learn effectively? From I2I's perspective, with our remote learning platform, it's actually perfect for us to work with kids from comfort of their own home. They don't have to go out and interact with anyone, to work with us to have a custom learning solution to brush them up on key math or English concepts that they might need. One of the things that we focus on especially is universal skills that will help them not just in one particular class, but all throughout their classes. For example, with math, we take them through various strategies of answering questions that make them think outside the box. And that type of thinking helps them with critical thinking in other areas of school as well, other classes. Something that we're also considering now is if the environment is right, we're going to think about doing 8 to 9 person camps, where we have maybe a 16-hour camp where we deliver what we see as the most important math and English skills that they're going to need going into their new school year, and also in preparation for standardized tests. Things that will help them the most and engage them the most in getting ready for that in-person learning again.
So it sounds like I2I has a solution for almost every situation here. If remote learning is the only possibility because of the pandemic through the summer, you have a solution for that from the technical side. If they're allowed to come, students are allowed to come to a camp, you have ideas about putting together some camps and some one-on-one tutoring, if that's a possibility as well. You can deliver in any flavor of learning that fits the student. Is that right?
That's right. And like I said, our remote program, we've been very happy with it, with the way we deliver it, in which we focus less on FaceTime between student and teacher and more the screen sharing of the work. One of the biggest drawbacks I see with remote learning is not enough time is spent interacting with this between the student and the teacher, showing the student, interacting with them on how to do the work. And with our screen sharing, students can write their work on the screen, just as at the same time a teacher can correct their actions on the screen at the exact same time. And I think that's one of the most important keys to having kids learn well, is being able to work with them in real time, as opposed to any sort of lag that might occur in between of any other kind of remote learning.
Gotcha.
program.
And I know I2I has been known in this whole community for a long time when it comes to standardized tests, whether it be high school test or the SAT, ACT, even the GRE. You've been out there tutoring students, getting them prepped. What's going on with standardized testing? What's your opinion of where we are and where we're headed?
Well, you do see a lot of colleges dropping the requirement for SAT, ACT, and that could be a great move forward, but you kind of never know where colleges are going to go next. That requirement is also not, that's not the full story. It's great to hear, but with a lot of my students who are very competitive either in the athletic world or the scholarship world, those colleges are still using SATs and ACTs to judge scholarship amounts, or if they're even, in case of a lot of my D1 athletes, the coaches have said, we've got too many applicants, we're going to look at your ACT scores to determine whether or not you're going to get on the team. So there's a lot of colleges, even though they've waived it for a very general set of students who are basic applicants, for anyone who's looking for scholarship money or to get on a sports team or for anything else, those SATs and ACTs are still being looked at. So it's dangerous, I think, or short-sighted, I should say, for someone to immediately say, well, I don't need the ACT or SAT anymore. They're being completely waived. It's very dependent upon the student's situation.
That's interesting you bring that up, because I'm on the board of a credit union locally, and one of the biggest criteria in our rubric to decide who gets a scholarship from the credit union is their SAT, ACT scores. And so I can't see us dropping that just because some of the universities out there are not requiring it. So students, while they may not need it to get into a college, might need it, as you said, to pick up a scholarship.
And I always tell people, if it's not going to be the SAT or ACT, they're going to find another measurement. And sometimes it's better to go with what you know than what you don't know. And, if they drop that, you don't know what they're going to come up with to use as a measurement. And sometimes maybe the ACT and the SAT will still the best guide in that sense.
Right, because using a GPA is different for every school situation, private schools, public schools. So you're right, the standardized testing looks like it's going to be here for a while. So given that, how does one, in this uncertainty of the fall, how do I prepare for the future if I'm looking to get into a different school, if I'm looking to take a standardized test, or how do I get prepared now?
Well, from I2I's perspective, I'll tell you what I tell every parent. The best way to prepare for SAT or the ACT is practice. And with our one-to-one program, what we do is we take students through practice tests. And that's important because it gives students a sense of the rhythm of the test, the length of the test, how the difficulty of the questions go, and many times, especially in math, from easy to hard. And it gives students a very good picture of what that's like and a sense of expectation. And then, once they're done those practice tests, they get a score. And from there, we build goals. How much higher can we get you the next test? And it's always about building to the next goal. And that's, from my perspective, that's one of the most important things for students is showing them exactly how they're improving every step of the way and what they need to do to keep improving. A lot of times students just think they can do a practice test or a practice question of the day. And while the intention there is good, it doesn't give students require enough focus for them to really get a feel for the test and really improve their score. And with working with students one-to-one, that's really what we believe is the best thing. With our remote program too, we work with a lot of athletes who are always traveling, especially now that summer is coming up, where they're going to be traveling from camp to camp to camp. We can work with students from wherever they might be. They just need to log in using some local Wi-Fi, and we can work together on a practice test and get them improved while they're traveling the country, working on their camps. And that's been an important goal for us.
Well, being a former customer of I2I and having a daughter who your approach was exactly that. I remember it now. You kind of set the bar, attain the bar, raise the bar, and you kept taking her up. And as she performed, she got very comfortable with the fact that she was going to be more successful. So that approach works. It worked for her, and I'm sure it worked for a lot of your customers.
And I think a lot of sports players can see my analogy with, I tell people practicing for these standardized tests is a lot like playing a sport. Playing a sport in high school, especially competitive sports, you have students working once, sometimes twice a day, just to get a tiny bit better at that sport. And what I emphasize to my students is the standardized tests are very much the same way. You need to have consistent practice to get better. Now, I'm not having people practice once, twice a day. I think that's a little much to ask, especially from students' busy schedules today. But we try to get people practicing at least once a week. And if we can just get that consistency, then students will be able to see consistent increases. And all of our students increase. And what I tell kids is, the more you practice, the higher and higher you'll go. Because the work doesn't get harder, it's just tricky. And students need to learn the way around those tricks, much the way they practice sports.
Yeah, and do you take that same philosophy if I'm tutoring an elementary school child or a junior high school child in math or English, practice assignments that they do over the summer?
Right. Now, well, for students who want to maintain their grades or improve their grades for just regular school subjects, what I recommend to parents is go bring a tutor in at least once a week to make sure the student's doing the homework. One of the most important things and problem areas I see is students just aren't doing the homework properly. They fall behind a little bit, and then it just steamrolls from there. They keep falling behind a little bit more every time. And if you have a tutor there who's just making sure that their student is doing their homework properly and on track, then it makes it a lot easier for them to maintain a competitive grade all throughout the year. And that's one of the most important things. If you ever have a student or a parent who's wondering about, how do we make sure that our children's grades are being maintained.
Gotcha. And so to wrap things up for today, and I really appreciate your time, any helpful hints? Here we are, again, we're in the beginning of the summer. The parents are maybe a little disappointed in where the academic year ended up this past year, and maybe that kind of daunting outlook of what might be in the fall. Can I help them at this point, at this juncture, get prepared?
Well, we're available for anyone who's interested in working with us either on a one-to-one or potentially our camps that we're probably going to look into announcing that in the next week or two if we end up going that route. But if we don't, our most popular thing has been our one-to-one tutoring, whether it be in their house or, with the consideration of the pandemic, remotely with our tablet program. And that's one way to do it. Any parent who actually has questions, even if they're working with any other tutoring program, I'm happy to give parents a second perspective on things or get a second opinion on anything. I think that's one of the most important things is don't be afraid to ask questions. I encourage parents to look around and explore different options, because sometimes one thing that doesn't work for one student, another solution might be available that they're not aware of.
Right. We all learn differently, don't
Right.
we? Right. Very good. So that's our discussion today on education. There's a panel that will come up right now that will share with you the contact information for Eye to Eye. And we thank you, Michael, for sharing
thank you.
a bit about where we are and where we're headed. Thanks.